what was your first connection to music? So what is your first memory around music?
Um, that's a hard one to answer. I mean, I grew up with parents who loved music. My dad, in particular, really loved jazz. So we used to listen to his jazz LPs, usually on Sundays. And he would educate me about all these amazing jazz musicians, mainly saxophone players. So he really liked Sonny Stitt. And we listened to quite a lot of Sonny Stitt on alto, which I think is probably why I was always drawn to alto. We listened to quite a lot of Cannibal Adderley, Jackie McLean, and that was my introduction to music and to jazz. Also, my parents, obviously, they lived in Nigeria. My dad's not Nigerian, he's Grenadian, but I was born in Nigeria, and there's a lot of Afrobeats, particularly a lot of fela that they used to listen to. So a mixed bunch.
Mixed bunch. Yeah. So jazz music, basically your first the touching point was jazz music, or there was more than a genre.
Yeah, I think so. I think because my dad was so attached to it, and because he had seen so many of the greats, he'd seen the likes of Cannonball and Sunny Stitt. So it was like there were all these stories that came with it, that I think that's why, I was really interested in jazz. I didn't know until quite a bit later that actually my granddad was a jazz musician in the Caribbean, but he died long before I was born, so I didn't meet him.
Okay, that sounds interesting. And then your love for saxophone came immediately. So when was your, first touching point to that, powerful instrument? I mean, I believe saxophone is a powerful instrument.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think actually when I look back, all the music that I liked, even like TV theme tunes, were saxophone heavy. But when I was 8, a friend of my mum's had a tenor saxophone in her flat because her boyfriend at the time had left it, and she'd been trying to get a sound but she couldn't, and I was wanted to have a go, and I got a sound, and then I was like, I want to play sax, I want to play sax. It took a little while before I actually got my saxophone. I had to do recorder first, which I didn't enjoy. But when I got to secondary school, when I was 11, they had a competition where you could win music lessons, and I entered. I was one of the winners, and I chose saxophone, and that was it. I started saxophone seriously from the age of 11.
Age of 11, so very young.
Yeah, well, you say that, but actually I teach now, and I've got a couple of students who are, well, one who's already on the scene, but two who are younger, who are going to be massive because they're so good. They both started much younger than me. They started at 7 and 8.
7, 8.
I know, because they've got these new lighter saxophones now.
Okay.
They're called lighter saxes, and they don't have all of the keys, but they're good enough for younger players to get to a certain level. You can get up to, if you do the classical grades, you could get all the way up to grade 4, and then you need to get a full size sax. So it's giving younger players now the chance to get stuff together much, much earlier.
Of course, yeah. And what did you realize? Oh, this is something I want to do in my life, professionally speaking. It was,
I, I think from when I first got the sax, but um, my big thing was meeting Gary Crosby and Janine Irons from Tomorrow's Warriors. I don't know if you were aware of that
no.
organization. In the UK, it's a premier organization for jazz musicians. They came together, it was formed from a very famous organization called the Jazz Warriors, which operated in the 80s. Famous members of that, Courtney Pine and Steve Williamson. This is a UK thing. And the Jazz Warriors being formed because musicians of Black origin were not being recognised on the UK jazz scene, so they created their own thing. And Tomorrow's Warriors has come out of that, and their big thing is to give a space to musicians from all different ethnic minorities to learn jazz. They also did a really big emphasis on female musicians, and it's no surprise that they are behind, you know, they were creating a space, and you have all these famous musicians, UK jazz musicians coming out of it, like Nabaya Garcia, Shabaka Hutchins,
Yeah.
Zara. We all went to Tomorrow's Warriors, and that really, Gary and Janine provided like a musical family. Also, I should say it's free. So that really reduced, you know, meant that you could get people from all different backgrounds. Some people were really rich, some people were really poor. If they couldn't afford an instrument, Gary and Janine would find an instrument for them. And
Oh,
I
that's
really think,
amazing.
yeah, they're great. And that was really when I started thinking, yeah, I want to do this seriously.
Mm. When was it, this connection between the organization and you, Camilla? It was immediately, I mean, it was,
Well, I met them when I was 11.
okay.
I went to see a band called Jazz Jamaica, who I later went on to play with. I saw them. I saw these amazing saxophone players, tenor player Dennis Baptiste, and amazing alto player called Jason Yard. And I was like, these guys are amazing. Me and my mum went up to them afterwards. And then, as Gary and Janine are, they said, keep in touch. And I did. And I went down to the Warriors sessions. And that was it, became part of their family. And, you know, years later, I joined Jazz Jamaica, which is their professional band that they have.
Of course. Yeah. I'm learning a lot from you now because I didn't know this. And love it. Camilla, and so I wanted to share with you this because I recently had the opportunity to enjoy an amazing band, the Kokoroko, that they're part of the London jazz scene, and you know you are part of it too. And what surprised me the most um, is the freshness and the dynamic atmosphere they were able to create. And this is something that, you know, I see every time I listen to, you know, some artists that, you know, represent that scene. So I wanted to ask you what for you is distinctive about London jazz scene, and why today this scene is a point of reference when it comes to the contemporary jazz.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Kokoroko, because, you know, they all came out of Warriors as well. Sheila Maurice Gray.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that's the answer to the question, really, is that this organization, obviously we all had our own thing and our own journey, but they provided a safe place for us where we could explore and learn jazz, but also where it was acceptable to bring in our heritage. Prior to that, you didn't really see UK jazz musicians writing tunes that reference, say, African heritage or Iranian heritage or whatever. It just wasn't a thing. And they created a space where it was like, no, we can. I feel comfortable to write a tune that references so and so part of Nigerian tradition, for example, that is important to me. And I think that's why that UK scene had that freshness, because it was allowing us the freedom to express our heritage, I think.
yeah, yeah. That's powerful because your heritage is yourself. It's part of you. So I think,
Exactly. Yeah. And it was like, I think, because I'm slightly older than say Sheila, a few years older than her. And I think even those years, it's like if I think back prior to the kind of boom of the UK jazz scene, so let's say that was like 2017,
mm,
2018, I you did it just would have been such a no-no to have been presenting tunes like that. You know, people would have laughed. I remember I wrote a tune and it was slightly during that boom, but not quite. And somebody laughed at the content of the, you know, what the tune was about. It was about slavery, and that shows you that now, of course, that's completely accepted, and nobody would think that that was, you know, why are you writing a tune about that? But I remember this particular bass player laughing.
mm,
So, you know, there's a real shift now.
of course, and it's interesting what you say because um, it brings to my mind because I read an article about yourself saying that the time of pandemic, the first pandemic, was really important for you because you were able to dive uh, into the Ibio-Ibio culture. So Ibio-Ibio people is part of your heritage. And how much at that time was important for you, Camilla, when it comes to, you know, the album you created, but firstly, the heritage you share when we're sharing your music during, you know, live performances?
How important was the
Yeah,
pandemic?
yeah.
Yeah, it was important. I mean, I had been thinking about how to write. I wanted to write stuff about being from the Ibibio culture, but I had been touring a lot. I didn't realize how much I've been touring until we couldn't tour anymore. And I was like back at home and I was like, I've barely been home. And of course, when you're on the road and it's for the tours are full on, you don't have time to write. So what was really great was having that time where I didn't have anything else to do, no other gigs. I did a little bit of teaching online, but I just had all this time. So for me, that first pandemic was really, really useful. Also, all of my bands were in the same situation, so I could be like bouncing ideas off them, being like, "Oh, do you like this? What do you think about this?" Or, and we were able to get together when the restrictions eased a bit, and
Yeah.
that was great. Because normally, you know, my bass player Daniel Casimir, you know, he has his own project. He plays with Nabaya. You know, he's busy a lot, so it was great to have, you know, been back to, because we've been playing together since 2014. So being back to those days when we didn't have so many gigs and we had loads of time to rehearse. So it was really important.
Yeah. And what is the most powerful thing you discovered about the Ibio culture, about your heritage during that time?
So the Ibibio culture, I think, is that it's basically it's the message of togetherness. I think, you know, and we all stand together. I think that's something that's really important. It's something that I think, especially during the dark ages of the pandemic and also the rough period after the pandemic's been over, you know, to hold on to, because I think we underestimate the effect that that whole period has had on everybody. Everything has changed, I think, as a result. But if we hold on to that, I think, you know, you get through.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Um, absolutely. One of my, I mean, my favorite song is Creation, Abazi. It's not the first song. Yeah, and it does. Yeah.
Yeah, the goddess. Yeah, yeah. Our creation myth. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because actually, when I first started writing the album, which would have been like probably a year before the pandemic, that was what it was going to be about. It was just going to be about the creation myth. But during the pandemic, I got into researching more about the Ibibio culture and our beliefs. And so I wanted to bring more stuff into it.
And how was the experiencing of, for example, yeah, of researching more about the Ibio culture?
It was really yeah, very, very informative to look into what the Ibibio tribe are and look into the important things in the village, in our village. Also, I found it very, very informative, and it was useful. You know, I think my mum got quite into the research as well. Like, it was good fun. You know, it was a nice period to learn more about where I'm from, basically.
Yeah. What is it your favorite song? So the song you're, you know,
Hmm.
more connected with.
That's a hard one. I don't know that I favorite song to play is probably Abasi Isang,
Mm.
because that's you know, that's a bit of a party one. But I couldn't say. I think because I didn't write it like that, I wrote it as it's not a suite of music, but I almost wrote it like that. It's like everything it connects into each other. So I think of it like one piece of music, I guess. So it's hard to pick out my favorite.
Certificate, yeah. Uh, one of the things I love the most about that album, and I mean, it is connected to the what we were talking about before. So the London jazz scene is this fresh blend between, you know, different sounds and vibrations. So the West African sounds, the new contemporary jazz scene, and, you know, other genres, you know, mix it together. Uh, what is your biggest influence if you think about West African music, if you think about your heritage? Is there, you know, a major influence, so an artist or a song that um, it is part of yourself when you created an album, or for example when sharing music during live performances?
I think one of my biggest influences is a saxophone player, Kenny Garrett. I mean, he's a ridiculous saxophone player. Obviously, such a heritage. He played with Miles Davis in the 80s. And he's a ridiculous player. But what has always inspired me is his compositions. I think what I like about his compositions, some of them almost sound like nursery rhymes. Like the first tune I heard of his is a tune called Sing a Song or Song. When you dissect that harmonically, it isn't easy, but it sounds easy. It draws people in. And I like that style of composition. When I was at college, there was a terrible trend of people saying, I'm going to write this in 13, and it's sounding hard and sounding like an exercise. I think that's fine if you want to learn how to play over odd time signatures. But in terms of actually writing music, that's the complete opposite of my goal. I guess I like simplicity, that
Mm.
simple. So, you know, you're not selling out, but it's like you're creating beautiful melodies. But, you know, when you look at it, and it might be in odd time signatures, or the harmony might be quite odd or difficult. And that's really what I'm looking for, is like complexity within like simplicity, I guess.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge. Simplicity is, yeah.
It is, yeah. It sounds so easy, but no, there's a reason why some of these compositions, particularly like some of the ones I like from Kenny Garrett, why they're so timeless, because it's a work of genius, really.
Because of the simplicity, because of that, you know, way of playing and sharing music.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's how you share your message, and how
mm,
and how you share your music. If it's so hard for people to get the message, I wonder what the point of it is.
yeah. What it is your message, Camilla, when performing?
Well, I think in performing, it's sharing a togetherness. That's what I really like. I always feel the togetherness and oneness with my band. And I liked that, the best gigs are when the audience participate in that as well. And you create one being through the vehicle of music and composition.
I love it. It's a sort of ongoing conversation, you know,
Yeah,
between you and an audience. I love
yeah.
it. And how would you define um, your music? Because as I told you before, it's for me every time it's it's kind of a difficult thing, you know, not explaining people but telling people, okay, so this is one of my favorite artists that I've been listening to recently, Camilla George. And they, sometimes they ask me, okay, they if they're not into jazz or contemporary jazz music, what kind of music? And for me, sometimes it's quite challenging because it's a beautiful blend of everything. So how would you define this blend, this beautiful, kind of composition?
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's bits of everything. There's bits of jazz. I see there's a ballad, there's Afro beats, there's some Latin aspects, there's obviously the hip hop aspect, because I was, very pleased and lucky to have collaborated with Daru Jones, who's an amazing hip hop drummer,
Mm.
and Sanity, the rapper. It's hard to package it, really. I don't know. I don't know how my agent sells it, but yeah, It's very, yeah, I don't know would be my answer to that question. It's a hard one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can imagine. Yeah. And when it comes to the sorry, the collaborations you had in Ibio-Ibio, what is it, the one um you bring inside of you?
Well, that is hard because I don't think I could say one. I think it was the mishmash of Daru, who I had met. We'd done a tour just before lockdown with the late great Pee Wee Ellis, so that's how I met him. And it's ridiculous. I'd done a couple of tours with Sanity. She was also on the Pee Wee Ellis tour, and that was great. Her contribution was just perfect. His was Kadiani Koyate, the kora player, is fantastic, and I just love playing with him. A beautiful vibe, beautiful player. And then Shirley Teta on guitar joining us again. I mean, Shirley's a blistering talent on
It is.
guitar. And then that horn section, I always love playing with Sheila and Rosie. We've been playing together for a long time. Again, they've come through the Warriors, as has Shirley. So I couldn't really say like which one was the greatest. I think it was the combo of it, and that's for me was like I knew that I was going to enjoy the album when we got to the recording session. I was like, all my favorite people are here, so this is going to be great.
Yeah, and it follows the sense of togetherness that you want to share when going onto the stage. I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, we did the album launch at Jazz Cafe. I think they were quite concerned as to how we were going to fit everybody on stage. We managed it. It was quite tight, but it was lovely, and it's just looking around being like, yeah, this is great. And I've also forgot Renato Paris, who was an addition to the band. I mean, Renato, it's been fantastic working with him. Great vocalist, great keys player. I mean, it's been great.
I mean, I imagine. Do you have a story to share? If you think about the album or the collaborations you had.
What you mean, a story as to how they agreed to collaborate, or?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Um, well, with Renato, actually, it's put me in a situation where I'm very fortunate to have two piano players of, great talent at my disposal because, Sarah Tandy is a core member of the band. She's been playing with us since 2014. Amazing pianist. But circumstances came. She got COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. She got long COVID, which meant that she was unable to play for quite some time. She's on the album, but we discussed and we like she didn't think she was going to be able to do the whole album. She just wasn't well enough. And then Renato, I played with a bit, and then thought, yeah, he'd be really good. And then realized Renato's a great singer too. And then you had the whole kind of merging because he's on Ukpong and he takes an amazing solo on that vocal solo. And he's now does some of the gigs, Sarah can't do them, and it's brilliant. It's great playing them. And when we do the big band, we have both of them. So it's amazing. We're doing that again at Ronnie Scott's. I believe it's the 11th of February, and I can't wait for that. So yeah, it was sad circumstances, but it's made this like super band as a result of it because we've got Renato and Sarah now.
Sometimes negative circumstances can transform into, something unplanned, but turned out to be, a good thing.
Definitely. And I think, as I said before, all of these people that play with me are hugely in demand, whether doing their own projects or other people's projects, so it's great. What they're doing this album has created for me is a collective of musicians, which is useful because everyone's going forward, they're busy. It means I always have great players to call on when we're going, to go on the road, and that's a really nice position to be in, really.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. Are you working on new works for 2023, Camilla?
I haven't been as yet. I am going back into like the practice room and studio tomorrow, and I'm just going to see what happens. I mean, I'm always somebody that likes to write with I like to have stories in my mind. That's how I write, and that's always been the inspiring thing. And I have been extremely busy this 2022 because it's suddenly like, the gigs are back, tour, tour, tour. I only got back from tour on the 23rd of December, so I've had like hardly any days at home.
Mm.
But I am looking to kind of to have a think about writing more stuff. I think my band are like, we need more tunes, so I'm see how that goes.
To see how that goes. Let us know about your future works. Camilla, thank you for sitting down with me today. It was wonderful. I want to acknowledge your contribution in music specifically. For all jazz lovers around the world. And as I told you before, I had the pleasure to um, discover your music recently. I'm glad I found that album, and I'm still enjoying it every. I mean, I like to listen, for example, Creation by Tazi in the morning, and I love it. I mean, it lifts my spirits every single time. I put the headphones and uh, yeah, and enjoy the vibration. So thank you for that. Thank you for your music, and keep sharing great stuff.
I will do. Thank you for having me.